Today, I'm going to talk through 8 travel tips that's going to help you stay injury-free in your holidays. I haven't seen many people talk about these tips, but it's weird because injury is one of those things that can absolutely ruin a family holiday. I talk about traveling in Japan a lot in this video, but these tips really apply to traveling anywhere, including just within your own country. So I recently went on a family holiday to Japan, and unfortunately some of the people I was traveling with suffered some injuries. This pretty much ruined their trip and affected their motivation for traveling again in the future. Here are a few things that I noticed that we could have done to avoid having these issues. We're going to talk about what not to do with budgeting, accommodation, transport, activities, and we'll also talk about what to do before the trip when you're preparing for it. So let's get into it. So when I was growing up, I did a lot of traveling, and the way I would save on some money was to book accommodation through Airbnb, use transport like trains, buses, and a lot of walking. Then I'd also do activities that are free and just required a bit of exploration. Doing this then allowed me to dedicate more of my budget towards shopping, food, luxuries, and experiences. But now that I think about it, the more affordable options for accommodation, transport, and activities are also the more physically demanding ones. This brings me to tip number 1, which is dedicate more of your budget towards these. Spend more on accommodation, transport, and activity options that are safer and more convenient for you. The next few points will tell you why. So let's look into accommodation. When we were looking for a place to stay, we wanted something with the best location, something that could fit a family of 8, and a low cost option. We only paid a little bit of attention to how accessible the accommodation actually was. We ended up choosing a regular house in Japan through an Airbnb. The pictures looked good and it had good reviews, but when we got there was actually a lot of things that were physically demanding. It had this unexpectedly big step in front of the house. The stairs didn't follow the usual Western standards that we were used to. These steps were quite steep. The height of each step was more than usual, and the length of each step was really short. My foot couldn't even fit on the whole step. And also there were no rails on either side. The bed itself was so close to the floor that you really had to put a lot of effort to get out of the bed. The toilet spaces were so small that you had to bend and twist and sit in a certain way just so that you could fit in there. And of course, this isn't a big deal for some people, but if you had to do these activities multiple times a day for a whole week, eventually it catches up on you and it can lead to random aches and pains, especially if you're not used to doing a lot of stairs, walking, squatting, or other physical activities at home. So this brings me to tip number 2, which is prioritize accommodation that's accessible. Here's a checklist that you can screenshot for when you're planning your trip. Make sure there's no stairs to get to bedrooms. The beds are raised. Toilets have space and are raised. Sometimes toilets are built smaller in other countries. You'd want walk-in showers instead of those ones that you have to step over a bathtub. This helps to reduce the falls risk in wet surfaces. If you're going to be using public transport, choose accommodation that's less than 10 minutes away from the train station or the bus stop, whatever it is that you'll be using more. 10 to 15 minutes doesn't seem like much, but if you're doing this back and forth every day, it can take a lot of time and energy, and it can seem like a burden, especially if you're doing this at the end of the day where you're already tired and you're feeling sore and you just want to get home. An extension of this tip is to book a hotel if possible. A hotel has all these useful services and features that we can sometimes overlook. For example, hotels are easier to find on maps, and in general, they're usually a lot more accessible as well, and they can help with country-specific things like filling out forms. As a quick side note, in Japan, there's this thing called luggage forwarding services. It's this up-and-coming thing where people will take your luggage for you from the airport or the hotel that you're staying in, and they bring it to the next destination that you're going to. And that way, you don't have to carry your luggages around while you're traveling the streets or the train stations, which can sometimes seem like a maze. And this is actually a really good segue onto the next part of the video, which is just talking about transport. So towards the end of our trip, we were running low on cash and we wanted to save where we can. We had to get from the bullet train station to our next hotel, and we had an option of either taking a 30-minute taxi ride for $80 and a 45-minute train ride for $10. So the obvious option that we went with was the $10 train ride. We didn't factor in that we had to walk 5 minutes to the train station. And once we were in there, we had to spend another 5 to 10 minutes finding the right platform, the lifts, the escalators. We had to change trains. That was another 5 minutes. Then we had another 5 minutes for the train to arrive. another 5 minutes to walk to the hotel. And we did all of these while carrying our luggages. By the end of it, I was thinking if we spent that extra $70, it probably would have been worth it, given we would have saved an hour of our time and a lot of energy. So tip number 4 is avoid public transport, especially if there's a lot of extra walking involved. There's multiple changes in the trains and buses, and you're carrying a lot of things. The taxis in Japan look really compact, but are actually really spacious inside. I don't think I've ever been able to stretch out my legs fully in a moving vehicle. But of course, this option is not always affordable. If you're going to use public transport, here's another checklist that you can screenshot. These are the things that really helped us out with our travels. 1 is walk less by getting lost less. So I'd say practice using and reading Google Maps in your country. So when you are overseas, you're really familiar with how to use it already. It's a bit of a skill, and the more you use it, the more you'll understand the little signs and the settings that you can choose. Next one is to use the Google Translate app to ask for directions. When doing this, it's also a good idea to learn the basic phrases of the native language, and this will help get someone's attention and just show your politeness. For example, the words I used the most in my trip was the equivalent of thank you and excuse me. The other thing is you study the trip, familiarize yourself with the train lines and just the buses and their timings. Try to know the exit number that you're going to take when you get out of the train, and just double check that there are lifts and escalators wherever it is that you're going. So one of the times when we were moving from one hotel to the other, we accidentally found ourselves in a train station where the lifts and the escalators were not available. The only way out was to go through 3 flights of stairs while carrying our luggages. Here's a clip of everyone else carrying their luggages up these flights of stairs. The other thing is don't rush. Spend time looking at and analyzing the map of the train station. That way you don't get lost and end up walking further than you need to. Looking at these maps also helps spotting where the lifts and escalators are. Make use of priority carriages in the train. In Japan, you can find certain marked ones with more space for assistive technologies, and some of them open right up in front of a lift, so it's really convenient. Next big thing is carry less. So if it's available, I'd make use of the luggage forwarding services that I talked about earlier. I'd also use a smaller luggage. That way it'll limit how much you bring. It'll also limit how heavy the thing that you have to carry is. In Japan, where everything is very compact, it's hard to open up big luggages anyways. If you're worried about not having enough clothes for your trip, just try to find an accommodation with a laundry service or a washing machine and dryer combo. So the next thing to look into is the activities. And I'll keep this pretty short because this is going to be very unique for everyone. But in general, tip number 5 is avoid busy times in tourist attractions. Navigating through a busy crowd is hard and stressful. You'll be moving through the streets a lot slower, which means that you'll be doing a lot more standing, more time on your feet. You'll be getting bumped and pushed out of nowhere. And usually these are unproductive anyway because it's too busy to shop or enjoy the scenery. So tip number 6, find out if the places that you're going to have accessible equipment for people with extra needs. An example of this is in Disneyland and Universal Studios. They rent out prams and wheelchairs for specific people. And in airports, there's also free wheelchairs and prams. If you're going to a more established facility like a theme park, just check their website or just call ahead. Traveling is normally already expensive. And if you're someone who wants to be more cautious or wants to travel with more peace of mind, it's going to be even more costly. So tip number 7 for older adults and people with disabilities traveling, try to save up for longer periods of time so that you have a bigger budget and you can pay for all these convenient and safe way of doing things. Now on to the last tip of the day. One of the biggest reasons people get new injuries or aggravate old injuries on holidays is this. They end up doing activities that they're not prepared for. So when we're home, we stay comfortable and we just walk around the house. We might do an hour or 2 hours of activity for shopping or groceries. Maybe we might clean the house. But when we're overseas, we end up doing a lot more because there's so much to do, so much to explore. People end up doing so much more unexpected walking, standing, and carrying. To help with this, tip number 8 is to build your capacity and your strength before you go on your trip. This is a whole topic on its own, so I'll be doing a separate video on this so I can go into more detail on how to do this well. But here's a short version of this. If we expose ourselves to the kind of things that we're already going to be doing in our trip, we're going to reduce our risk of hurting ourselves. If we regularly walk 10,000 steps every now and then, our bodies won't be in a shock when we're on holidays walking 10,000 steps a lot of the time. The main things to know is we want to spend 30 minutes of physical activity most days of the week. We want to do some specific strength training at least twice a week, and then do a lot of things to optimize our health and recovery. So if you or someone you know wants to build their capacity and their strength so they can travel, but you're being held back by a health condition or an injury, our team at Vuno Physiotherapy and Rehabilitation will help you figure out exactly what exercises you need to do that's going to be effective and safe for your condition. And if getting exercises done consistently is your struggle, we'll help you figure out strategies and ways to help make exercise part of your lifestyle. We offer a free telehealth consultation with everyone before we work with them. That way you can make sure that we're the right people to help you. If this is something you want to do, just fill out our intake form below. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope this helps you plan out your travels. If you want to learn more, here are a few of our other related videos.